What has power is the will of the people and their means to kind of fight back against the state, right? And voting in many ways is somewhat representative of that. I think Emma Goldman said it best when she said if voting changed anything, they wouldn't let you do it. And I think that's kind of true. That being said, voting is a good system.
Voting's like the sacrament of the state. Everybody worships it. The reality is, it makes no difference whether you vote or not. Voting is just a way to legitimize the criminal state so that people don't realize, hey, these guys are ripping us off.
Towards trying to reduce some violence. And I think that we can use voting if we use voting and combined with a lot of other things as a means of taking away power from the state.
Yeah, that's fine.
In terms of, is our democracy broken? Well, if you're talking about America, that's probably, it was broken from the moment it was in.
It's not broken. It's the whole purpose of it isn't what you think. The whole purpose of it is so that they can rob you. And from that perspective, it's working just fine.
Instituted because democracy is bad, but also it's probably been broken from what the founding fathers envisioned, and we've had kind of a
completely. The American Constitution was set up specifically to constrain government. This was in the heyday of classical liberalism, and the entire point was you would have this tiny, limited federal government, and it's completely different today.
A proto-fascist state since the end of the Civil War and during the Civil War. And it's kind of been broken since then, and I'm not sure if we can fix it with voting alone. I don't think it would be preferable to do so.
I don't know if I agree with that timeline. The Gilded Age, America was still a very free society.
Awesome. Prime?
Yes. So I think that when it comes to our institutions, I thought this question was problematic as well, right? One, I think that if it's just down to voting, well, yeah, we have an option, a mechanism within our society to make changes. I agree with Destiny there that you have to engage with the system, right? Like use the tools that you have available. And of those tools, I think we do have some robust tools that can make changes if change is what you want, right? So I think the ability is there. However, I think that everything around that ability, right? The public's access to the vote, right? The public's access to our institutions, all those things are damaged, right? Even the public's understanding of what the institutions even do, right? And I think some of that is even purposeful, that people don't even know how the best way to engage, right? You could say simply vote, sure, okay, but then I do vote. And
the big problem with voting is that in order for somebody to make an accurate vote, a vote that represents their interests, they have to be a veritable expert on politics, economics, a number of history. They have to really. It's very easy for politicians to mislead the public and say that my policy helps you when in fact it hurts you. Most people do not understand the impact of government policies on their life. So that's one problem with the whole system of democracy and the political system, is that it's very difficult for voters to vote accurately, to vote in their interests. Conversely, in the market economy, people know very clearly what is in their interest, what is to benefit them. If they spend money, if they make a trade, is it going to benefit them or not? They are experts in that regard because they alone know their particular value ends, and they have spent a lifetime trying to achieve their ends through the various means. That's one of many reasons why the market economy is vastly superior to the political process.
Then nothing seems to change, and I don't see results in my life, and things maybe seem to get worse. And I think it's an extremely discouraging process. I think it's organized, but it's also have an understanding of what these institutions are and how to either bend them to your will or have a plan to have some sort of institutional reform. So I'll leave it there.
Awesome. Okay, and Soy.
All right. I think of the three, I agree with you all, and I disagree with you all. Of course, voting is necessary but not sufficient. You must vote if you expect anything to change, but you also must
Why?
do more than voting. You need to.
I think there's a strong case for doing more than voting. I see zero case for voting. It's not going to make any difference. Now, trying to influence people's opinions, educate, advocate for change, write an article. This is something that can affect things. Voting, no, that's not going to change anything.
To contact your representatives, you need to organize. And what we
No. Begging your representatives, no, that's debasing. They're not going to listen. They don't care.
mean by organizing is speaking to.
Especially in the Canadian parliamentary system, which I happen to be subject to, they don't even control their own vote. It's all the leader of the political party.
Other people who are going to vote and finding out, what their positions are and organizing around their needs and building up communities and collective interests in improving your system. Make everything local. Really, really get out there and find these groups of synergy groups that you're going to build a policy around. Get involved in party politics. I've been involved in both the Democratic and the DSA parties, as well as campaigning for many wonderful campaigns that are on my back wall. And
I think he's got some valid points here. It is a good idea to organize politically, to get involved in campaigns.
And it's never going to be enough to get our perfect world. But if you don't try, well, you've surrendered all of your agency. And if you do nothing but vote, I feel that you've pretty much surrendered your agency in that case to people who are engaged in the system and are speaking up on your behalf.
Okay, so with that, we're going to open the panel if anyone would like to respond.
Fabian, what do you think you can vote your way out of Jim Crow? Like voting was actually not allowed, depending if you were black or poor at one point in America.
Do I think you can vote your way out of Jim Crow? Probably not. Why? What's the? Can you examine why you're asking that question?
Yeah, your quote was, sort of a snappy thing. If voting actually did anything, it would be illegal. And of course, it was illegal at some point in our history.
I mean, that's a witty retort, I guess, against Emma Goldman, but that's not the point or the context of the quote. So,
I think it's exactly the point in that we have to stretch outside simply voting and join others in direct action when it's appropriate. But I don't think that.
But we agree on
action,
that. That's the point.
Okay,
the point and context of what I'm saying is that, yes, you can use voting, right? But voting by itself doesn't have any power.
Yeah.
Definitionally, well, it can't have any power, right?
Yeah. With our organizing, we can make
definitionally
voting matter, and that's more to the point.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be backed up by the will of the people and to challenge the violence of this.
Basically, by the time that voting achieves anything, you're already there through other means. The voting's just a formality. It's the influencing public opinion that really changes things.
State, right? Ultimately, if the state is of the opinion that voting keeps you
the state doesn't have opinions, individuals have opinions.
From fighting them, right? Then they will as you want, whilst continuously gaining more power as they've done since the founding of and they'll kind of just let you have your paltry little victories, your little culture war victories. And meanwhile, they'll consolidate wealth at the top. They'll change the rules. They'll make it hard that you want to do. They will take away liberty, right? And so voting in and of itself, that process, you're appealing to has the monopoly on violence and has the monopoly on the usage of that violence and is the judiciary of that violence, all together. So ultimately voting definitionally, it can't be enough. It has to be activism. It has to be
again, he says definitionally. I don't think that's the correct usage of the word.
change in culture and philosophy, and it has to be change in the willingness to act in certain spaces or engage in agorism and things like that to exert your pressure on the system.
I think so. I don't think anybody disagrees. It's never just voting. But the question is if somebody says if you go to the gym, will that help you get more muscle? I don't think anybody would say no, it can't just be the gym. It also has to be sleeping, and it also has to be eating. Well, yeah, of course. So if you want to be politically engaged, there are more steps to be politically engaged than just voting. But voting is arguably the most important part of that political process.
Hard to disagree.
Because if the right people don't vote the right way, then nothing else matters. It is the part where we plug in, quite literally, to our institution.
But if everybody votes the right way, then your vote doesn't matter. It's all based on everybody else's vote. Your vote is never the deciding vote.
Working for them. Jim Crow, as an example, was brought up, right? Jim Crow was ended by voting. Yeah? This...
No, not really. Jim Crow was ended by the civil rights movement. Civil disobedience, marching in the street. By the time society got to a place where they could vote out Jim Crow, they were already there intellectually because of the arguments of equalists.
Jim Crow was ended by voting.
Okay, hold on.
Jim Crow was also created by voting.
True. I'm sorry. Hold on. I phrased that as a question. Let me restate that. Jim Crow was ended by voting. It was challenged multiple times by the Supreme Court, right, in cases like Brown v. Board of Education. And the Civil Rights Act of 64 literally came from our Congress that we voted on. And this is how Jim Crow got eliminated in a lot of different states, right, in 64 and 65 following with the Voting Rights Act. So, yes, Jim Crow was gotten rid of via voting.
But the voting was the last step in a really long process. You're giving all the credit to voting, when in reality it was the agitating. It was Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, these people saying we have rights, we're equal, whatever.
Oh, you're doing a lot of work to say that the state went against other institutions of the state that were violating people's rights, and then saying voting did this. It's maybe
every single one.
Seven degrees of Kevin Bacon there.
Hold on, I don't want to make it a total libertarian debate, but you always do this thing where libertarians will pose the state against the people, but you ignore the fact that there are times when the state acts on the will of the people, right? The state
acts on the will of the political class, and yes, it acts on behalf of the public. Elites are highly receptive to political change and the opinions of the majority because they want to stay in power.
Your example, well, give me the example, because Jim Crow's a terrible example because it's the state acting against the state that had already fucked over the people.
But the state didn't arbitrarily choose to fuck over the people with Jim Crow. That was the will of the people of certain groups of people, right?
It wasn't the will of certain people.
No, but it was the will of enough of them to make it law, hence the voting.
That's the whole problem with democracy in the first place. It's mob rule. It's the majority asserting their desires on the minority instead of respecting individual rights.
Hey.
Right, which is why voting is in and of itself problematic, because it is conflict. There is no way.
Every type of engagement with the political system is going to be conflict. That's such a worthless statement. All engagement with politics.
No, it's not a worthless statement.
Can you give me one type of political activity that doesn't involve some type of conflict?
Well, that's the whole point. Political activity necessarily involves conflict, whereas the market economy, there is no conflict. People are just working for their mutual benefit.
All of them, all of it does.
Of course, almost all of the activities that are engaged in Cospaya, almost all of the activities are engaged in Tron, Mexico, right?
Let's find a better statement, like the tyranny of the majority. You're a libertarian, you should be familiar with that one. So let's deploy it here and say, yes, sometimes voting is, 51% of people putting a tyrannical judgment on the minority, the 49%. So it's split 50-50. I want us to get to super democracy, where we have things like individual veto and local collective agreements that actually build up a just system.
It's always sad that the socialist is the one making the most sense in the debate.
based on sound principles rather than, we like the rainbow flag today, we didn't like it yesterday.
But there's no way to ever make a system that's going to make every person happy, right? If you're having a society, you're necessarily going to have some people plugged into that society that aren't going to be happy with 100% of the decisions made.
And
The error here is to view the state simply as an organization for dispute resolution, when in reality its nature is parasitic. It's a tool of exploitation, subjugation, and domination. I would argue, actually, you can have a system where everybody is happy, or at least maybe they won't be happy, but nobody's getting screwed over. And that system is the market economy. You see, in the state, you can win, but you can only win at the expense of somebody else. It's a win-lose system, okay? So, for example, a bureaucrat can get a nice cushy job, great benefits, but this comes at the expense of the salaries of the taxpayer. So the degree to which the bureaucrat wins is the degree to which every taxpayer loses. Well, not the degree, because in this case, one person's getting all the benefit. The cost is spread out amongst millions or hundreds of millions. But the relationship is still there of parasite to host. Let's take another example. Bailouts, okay? A rich firm goes bankrupt. The government bails them out. The rich investors getting bailed out, they benefit. But this comes again at the expense of the taxpayer. Tariffs are another example where domestic producers benefit, but consumers suffer. So any time somebody benefits from the state, somebody else loses. And that's the fundamental problem with the state, with state action. But in the market economy, that is not the case. People trade because they expect to benefit, and they're almost always right. So the market economy is a system where maybe not everybody's happy. I don't think we can aim for happy, where everybody can be happy. I don't think that's a viable goal. But it is a system where nobody is winning at the expense of anybody else. It's strictly mutually beneficial, win-win relationships, exchanges, and there's no parasitism. It is peaceful social cooperation, just individuals working together towards their harmonious ends, or ending that situation should that be the case.
It's not about whether
is absolutely fine, right? That conflict between parties is absolutely okay, right? But I wanted
it's
to
not conflict. Unhappiness is not conflict. What's conflict is imposing your will on other people. Aggression. You can have a voluntary society.
No, sometimes it's perfect.
You can never have a totally voluntary society.
Oh, I disagree, friend. Okay, by that definition of impose your will, yes, I agree. Which is why libertarians oppose aggression, not, say, force.
Bad thing, right? And let's use a powerful organization to make sure you don't do that. So
this whole debate is going to be arguing ancap shit with Fabian. Oh, fucking kill me.
At some point, we'll have to do that within any organization, right? If we lived in Ancapistan, right, we'd have to impose your will on me because I'd try to create an actual fucking functioning government. And then you'd say, hey, we don't want to do that anymore, okay? So that's inevitable. What I wanted to ask, though, was is a basic, more of a basic question, because there's a lot embedded in the question that our friend Erudite has asked. So what are the institutions to begin with, and what are people actually losing faith in? Right, we have a very wide, diverse country, and people have all kinds of thoughts about this. Like when we say this word institutions, what do you mean? Right, like is it just parts of the government? Is it like the rules and the order that we impose on ourselves? Like, what is it? What are we talking about? And what have we actually lost faith in?
I think an institution is going to be some establishment that we've entrusted with, like, almost monopolistically with, like, the
social contract theory. The only problem is that's not what happened. That's not the origin of the state. Okay, this is a creation myth. The reality is the state was established because one tribe would conquer another, and they needed a means of exacting tribute from the conquered tribesmen. So the state has always been a tool of domination, subjugation, exploitation, in a way that one group can live parasitically off of another. That's always been the nature of the state. That is its fundamental nature. And this myth of the social contract is just a post hoc rationalization for the rule of the sovereign.
Our society to some extent. So like when we look at the institution of our criminal justice system, we've entrusted them with the ability to.
But how can we entrust to an organization the responsibility of dealing with crime when that organization itself is criminal when it subsides through extortion?
Violence to pass judgment on us. When we look at the institution of voting, this is an institution that's supposed to like safeguard the ability for us to vote and elect leaders. We look at the institution of Congress. I think that's roughly what it is. They're these external, like huge things that are part of like safeguarding and running our society that we were entrusting with a lot of power to do so.
Let's imagine for a moment that 10 people land on an island, okay? Crash land, whatever. It's a decent sized island. Well, there's nobody there, so right away, you would get like a division of labor society, right? One guy would start fishing, another would maybe start making houses, whatever, and people would trade, or maybe you would even have like more of a socialist commune, you know, people just helping each other because whatever, it's an island, and who really cares who gets the most coconuts, right? But I'll tell you what you wouldn't have on this island. You wouldn't have, we need to put one guy in charge, and he's just telling us all what to do, and then we give him like 20% of our stuff, and he just gets to have that. That's not a system that anybody would set up, you know, if you were just crash landed on an island and you're trying to figure out how to make it through, you know, next month.
Okay. I mean, I would work with that colloquial definition. I mean, it's like not the definition.
Okay, what is the definition that you want to use?
Well, no, I'm saying I would work with that colloquial.
Well, no. Hold on. Give me the academic definition that we should be using.
I mean, well, an academic definition would be like any organization that has a purpose that is founded upon like educational or religious or you know what I mean? But it would become meaningless to.
That does not sound. Well, I guess institution. What are they trying to define here?
The conversation of like trust in the institution. So I'm saying like while that's not technically the definition, yeah, that's a good working definition that I accept.
Okay.
Sure. So
it's not that weird to say, yeah, I'll accept that when you propose a definition that isn't the word.
So typically, sure. It's usually an underhanded comment to go, your definition is fucking retarded, but I guess we can use it for the purpose of this conversation.
I never said it was fucking retarded.
I know you did it, but that was the implication. But that's okay.
That's not the implication at all.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm implying that it was the implication, so go.
Only love here. Okay.
Original debate, bro. I'm so ready.
Well,
there's just like, what's the point of the comment? Like, why say like somebody asks, what's your definition? And I give the definition like, that's an adequate definition, even if it's not the academic one. Like, why even say it? Why even give air to it?
Okay, Stephen, your feelings are hurt.
Not everyone is as mean.
My feelings are hurt.
You've spoken to Vosh too many damn times, all right?
Yeah, right.
I'm not playing tricks here. I'm just saying I will accept that colloquial definition for the usage of the conversation.
That's cool. That's cool.
We move to the next step. All right, kumbaya here. Like, how have they actually failed us? And do you guys agree, right? Like, do you guys agree that they've actually failed? Because, I think
obviously
that so many of our institutions.
I think the institutions are doing well. What do they mean by institutions? I mean, I think the state is doing exactly what it's always been designed to do, which is to extort wealth from the economic class and funnel that wealth to the political class. I think, in that perspective, it's working brilliantly from its goals. But the state is not the only institution or organization in society. I think the market economy does serve the people, does serve everybody. Which, I mean, what organizations are you talking about? Institutions
Actually haven't changed, right? Like maybe on the margins, things haven't changed. So how is it that they're failing us? And is this idea of them failing, is this a new thing, right? Because it seems to me, looking at a wider sweep of history than like just the present, that if you go into the past, people have always said these things, right? There are some points in times where people have a bit more trust. And then, but like the institution is always failing someone at some point in time, right? And they'll have a lot of the same complaints that I think some people have today. So like, in what ways do you actually think this institutions are actually falling apart.
Okay, well, so I would posit one first, that the institutions that have monopolistic power over individuals that is coercive is designed to be bad. It's not designed to
kill
reduce
me.
conflict. It's designed to oppress. That being said,
This
right,
whole thing is a
why don't we
libertarian
pick
debate.
a
It's the whole
specific
thing.
institution if we want to have this conversation? Like,
True.
we could pick the media, we could pick voting, like we could pick like whatever
Media. That's another institution that I think is failing terribly.
you guys want to go with. Like, pick an institution and we can look at it historically, because I think most of our institutions have gained in conflict in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years because of different social movements and political pressure.
No, I think you're absolutely right. So why not try the Supreme Court? I mean, it's something that's in the news, right? And people have all kinds of opinions about that now. People say that the Supreme Court is failing, the institution is failing, right? Right now, the left is saying that a lot, right? Like, well, this is a failed institution. And that's kind of because we lost, right? We got our asses kicked, and it is what it is, right? But previously, our conservative brothers and sisters were saying the exact same thing, right? That this is an institution that's completely failed us, and it's a massive...
I think the Supreme Court has failed society. It's basically just a rubber stamp on the state and expansion of state power.
Reform, and then they went out and did that reform.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought, my bad.
Sure. So just the last thing then. So I think that the Supreme Court as an institution is doing what it's supposed to do, and that I think it's a stifle on democracy, right? It holds us back from putting in whatever we like, right? Like it keeps us within the bounds of the Constitution or someone's interpretation of that Constitution. So I think it's working just as it's always been planned. I think that our understanding of how to use the Supreme Court, at least here on the left, right, has not advanced the way it has on the right. The Supreme Court is an institution of power, right? So we should use that, right? We should pack the court.
Should you? Did you learn nothing from Frodo?
With as many people as we can, right? And we should
FDR called. He wants his playbook back.
Use it like with a complete abandon.
2 sentences.
Right? Like, sure. Sorry. So we should use it with complete abandon and not be worried
The format is fucking terrible.
about like the rules
You got too many people.
because the other side isn't.
Okay, yeah, no, I think you
This guy in the bottom left hasn't said shit the whole time. Who is he?
illustrate the problem so succinctly with the evil that you want to commit, right? Which is that you want to create, you want to make the state more abusive, right? And you want to move in a direction as it already is, which is an institution of power that determines what rights people have and don't have without any actual basis upon voluntary power, right? The Supreme Court, ever since the Warren Court, right? So, I mean, like, we could go back and say that the Supreme Court didn't really step into the role of like constitutionality except under extreme circumstances, right? But, you know, ever since then has always functioned as a means of growing the power of the state. That it was a failed institution from the beginning because democracy is a failed institution if it's not voluntary. But yes, the court has gotten worse. But what's funny is that you say, well, the left has failed to understand how to use that power effectively. That's just not true, right? Like the DNC and the left have used the court to stop Trump over and over and over and over again. It has been, Trump was one of the most litigated presidents in history by different firms that were certainly left-wing in their political perspective, saying Trump is going too far. He's abusing his power. In our opinion, we're going to challenge this shit immediately. And like the Supreme Court was.
I still don't understand what that whole Trump thing's about. Like, he was reading classified documents in Mar-a-Lago on the crapper, like after he was president or something. It seems like a bit of a whole like to do about nothing. Like, when he was president, obviously he had access to this information, but now it's a huge deal that he hasn't after he was president. I mean, I just think the whole thing is a lot of partisan hysteria. I don't place much value on government secrets in the first place.
was used very actively during the Trump administration, as it was during other previous administrations.
So
Okay, wait. We need to have a conversation. We need to figure out if we want to argue like about democracy or not, because like we're just having an ancap debate right now. Is that what we want to do, or? Because now we're arguing, because that's what we're having, because Fabian, this is an ANCAP debate now. Like, should the state have any power? Because every single question is now through the lens of like, well, of course the Supreme Court is bad. All institutional power is bad. All democracy has failed and bad. All of it. Like, if that's what we want to talk about, we can, but let's shift gears into that then and drop.
Yeah, I have no problem taking on all three of you.
We need a libertarian Supreme Court.
I would rather not.
Okay, well, because that is where we're at, and that's where you're at, and that's where we're all at. We're in the libertarian black
You
hole.
brought on three lefties and then an ANCAP. What the fuck did you think would happen?
Let me propose a question to you all to try and reframe this.
Can I respond? Because I like to respond to what you were saying.
Sure, absolutely.
So, like, I'm just going to ignore the ANCAP problem. But, like, talking about the Supreme Court and how Trump was litigated, right? So I actually don't know. I don't know if that's the case, but I'm going to believe you. I'm just going to take you on your word on that he was the most litigated and probably maybe held back by the Supreme Court. However, the public doesn't feel that, right? The public doesn't actually keep track of these things. I think it's another part of